This is the wisdom of our Lord. I shared with you last week that the gospel text for the Sunday would be the feeding of the 5,000. And again, in the context of the dangers of lectionary, because the lectionary chooses very small portions of scripture that fit the worship, but then sometimes takes it out of the context and the larger story. So here in this story, first we have the rejection of Jesus in his hometown. We have him sending out the 12, 2 by 2, with nothing to take with them, remember. No bread, no bag, no money. Fortunately, they do have a staff, so once in a while they can get some coffee. Then comes last week's text of the death of John the Baptist, and now we have the feeding of the 5,000. But in the midst of the feeding of the 5,000, did you notice another little theme came in there? And that is the context of them wanting to get time away. There are two places. The apostles gathered around Jesus and told him that they had done and taught, and he said to them, "Come away to a deserted place all by yourselves and rest a while." And then immediately he made his disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side, to Bethsaida, while he dismissed the crowd. Saying farewell to them, he went on the mountain to pray. In the midst of all this turmoil that's going on, here is this need to take a break. To take a break. Do you think you need a break? Yes? Some people think I need to take a vacation. Can you imagine that? It's not for any sense of intent or anything. It's just I'm confused and indecisive. So technically, yes, I should take a vacation. I haven't had a Sunday away from the pulpit since Palm Sunday of 2020. So technically, yes, I should. But what would I do and where would I go? Vacations used to be going away somewhere with the family. And the pandemic has made all things more difficult, and traveling's difficult. We can't see our families. There's so much going on, and there's nothing that we can do about these circumstances. Past Monday, I had to go to Seattle, and when I was driving down there, I looked at the light rail, and it had proceeded so far that I realized suddenly, I don't think I'd been to Seattle since I went to the BLM a year ago. Not to Seattle for a year. Ooh. So if I did take a vacation, probably it would be a stay-home vacation during the pandemic with all the restrictions. I just wouldn't preach, and that just doesn't sound very useful to me. Other people tell me I need to get a dog. I grew up with a dog, loved the dog. I also know how much it is to take care of a dog. We used to go camping on almost all of our vacations when we were growing up, and of course we could take the dog. I fear that I might after a while need a break from the dog. And here's the thing, how many photographers do you know who have dogs? I think when we're feeling a little bit down or blue, we tend to think we need to add something. Like the midlife guy who buys a Porsche. I don't know why it's always a Porsche. Why not a Lamborghini? We go on a trip, we get new golf clubs so we can travel all the way to Scotland to play on Trump's course. Does it really work? I learned a lesson a long time ago when I first arrived to live in Hokkaido, and it was very close to Sapporo. So one day, it was a Saturday, it was a beautiful day, I decided I had to go down to Sapporo, and I went to Odori Park, right down in the middle of Sapporo. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I wanted to make sure I wasn't getting bored, so I took some things in my backpack. I took my camera, of course. I took snacks, my Walkman, this was in the 80s, a couple of books, one a Japanese novel, but then I also had the theological treatise of over 1,000 pages by Hans Kuhn called On Being a Christian. While I was there, I ran into one of my new students at the Sapporo Christian Center. She looked at my bulging backpack and she said, "What do you have in there?" Opened it up and showed all this stuff. And she said, "Erai," which just means great. But you see, in Japanese, you don't have to add the pronoun. There isn't. It's not that. It could be "you're great." It could be "that's great." But on the tone, if you just listen a little different, it could be "that's pretty stupid." You have to listen very carefully. And frankly, I agreed that was really stupid. That's particularly taking Hans Kung down to Odoriko. You know what? Here's an example of a sentence from Hans Kung. Both uncritical credulity and critical skepticism can be shaken out of their false security, but faith itself can be purified from both inculpable superstition and ideologies inspired by vested interest. Do you understand that? Had to go up and look the word firth, F-I-R-T-H. It's a Scottish word for an extended indentation into the coastline. One word I know you'll never forget. What was I thinking? I'll tell you what, I was full of myself. That full backpack represented what was inside, also full of myself. Reminded me of how often we in America go on vacations and make sure to take everything with us. This is, of course, I probably shared this story with you before from Blue Highways by William Least Heat Moon. But he was on a trip on the smallest roads in America, and he wrote about it. He says, in front sat an Argosy Land Cruiser with an Airstream trailer attached. On top of the Argosy was a motorboat, and on the front and back matched mopeds. Often I'd seen the American propensity to take to the highway with as many possessions as a vehicle could carry, the inclination to get away from it all while hauling it all along with us. I stood amazed at this achievement of transport called vacation. Is that the kind of vacation we say we need to go on vacation and get a break? Is that what we need to do? What do we need a vacation from and for? Some of us will probably say at this point, I'm already in the middle of a break. I don't need a break. We've had a break for a year already. We need to get back to the way things were, which we can't do. We've had time that's different, but it hasn't really been relaxing. Have you felt relaxed? Not me. We've had a break from what we think has been our normal lives. But you know what? We haven't had a break from ourselves. We have not had a break from ourselves. During the pandemic, I think we've been more burdened by ourselves, having so much time to think about ourselves, our lives, and how awful they feel in the midst of a pandemic. Our inner world is just as full as our backpacks or the Argosy cruiser. Even more so, it's been going on inside of our minds during this time. Maybe because we've had more time alone. Our lives have been disrupted, and that always brings tension. And all this stuff we've had to adapt to, masks, social distancing, telehealth, remote schooling, going out to restaurants is out, being isolated, missing our families, worrying about getting sick. And we had 4 years of the man who will not be named as president. I can sit at home, I can look around my house, and I can see plenty of things to do, but I just sit there in fretfulness. Grief will do that, but the pandemic does that too. So in a moment, getting back to Hokkaido, when I went down and I came back and I said, I'm going to go down to the park again, I only took my camera, none of the other stuff. Got down there and I started to take pictures of people because I was taking pictures of people, my attention was on them. It's dangerous to think of ourselves too much we often take ourselves too seriously so that our inner world is more real than the outer world around us. The world that we have created in our stories and in our ruminations becomes more real than what we experience from other people. That eventually can bring out narcissism. It is also a significant reason for alternative facts. Because if my inner real world is the real world, then whatever you're telling me on the outer world can't be true. Sitting there, watching people, taking their pictures, thinking about their lives, their dreams, their joys, their sufferings, precipitated a sense of calm in me. That's where it all started. When Jesus took a break, he did not take his Walkman or his camera with him. Remember, he sent the disciples out 2 by 2 with almost nothing. I used to always think of this in economic terms, but I really think spiritually this was a clearing of the mind as well. So they could be about their mission without being burdened by their own life and problems. Jesus went off to the desert. He went to be reconnected to God. When he sent the disciples on their mission, taking little meant they had to be dependent on other people. And they also needed to be dependent upon God as part of the message. Well, maybe we can think of it this way. Usually when, I'm saying this very generally, Americans go on vacation, we like to recreate. Right? We like to recreate. That person who was driving around that Argosy cruiser was recreating. I would say the same of going on a cruise or maybe particularly going to Disneyland. I suppose if you go to Disneyland, you could have a spiritual experience, but it kind of frightens me a little bit. You know, there is a Jedi religion. Does everybody know that? There's a Jedi religion. I looked it up and this is what it said. The Jedi Church believes that our sense of morality is innate. So quiet your mind and listen to the Force. Is that such a bad message? What we need in vacation is a vacation from ourselves, from all our thinking, worrying and storytelling. And we tell stories of our lives all the time to make explanations for the whys of our life. It makes us feel comfortable and more in control, but those stories become the truth to us. The truth. And then we interpret everything that comes our way based upon our personal interpretation of what our life is. We interpret everything. Susie comes to us and says, he doesn't like me. And then she interprets that by her own story, which believes that nobody really likes her. So anybody that's going to come to her, because her story is that nobody likes her, she's going to say, nobody likes me. We don't get vaccinated because the story we tell ourselves is that it can't be trusted. I have to take care of myself first. And my hero is Tucker Carlson. We do often become full of ourselves and we need a break from ourselves, and we need recreation in which we reconnect to God and not always recreation. We need a deserted place to go in spatially in our lives, but also internally in our hearts. We need to reconnect and remind ourselves of our dependence on God. So what is it for us? How do we find our deserted place in our hearts? Have you all heard of Shinrin Yoku? Shinrin Yoku, bathing in the forest in Japanese. It's this practice of walking through the forest. I know a lot of people will say, yeah, I go walking in the forest all the time, but the point is it's different because when you're walking in the forest, Shinrin Yoku, you are not thinking about anything. Your attention is solely on the forest. It's not easy to do. Or maybe it's art and music, walking a labyrinth. You know, you don't talk to people when you're walking a labyrinth. Everybody knows that? Gardening. How many like gardening? Lose yourself into your gardening. Journaling, meditation, yoga, vigil, march, silent retreat, Lectio Divina, centering prayer. I've always wanted to go on a pilgrimage. How about you? If I had a vacation and I had the money, I would go on a pilgrimage. When I was in Japan, I wanted to go on this pilgrimage that circumvented the whole island of Shikoku. It took weeks, and you visited 188 temples. It's a lot of walking. Or how about, this is another dream I have, how about an Amtrak pilgrimage to visit all the important places in the United States on Amtrak? And you wouldn't have to worry about driving. Do you know how much tension it takes out of us when we're driving? We don't even recognize it. Yesterday, when I was coming home, I was listening to a Christian rock singer named Jennifer Knapp. In one of her songs, the refrain said this: "I want to know you better than I do. Relieve me of myself and take me home to you. Relieve me of myself and take me home to you." Kind of sums it up. And now, just to give you another nice little break, some pictures of people at Odori Koen.
Thank you.